Pluto was never supposed to matter. For decades, it sat at the edge of the solar system like a forgotten mistake. Too small, too cold, too far away. Then, science made a decision. In 2006, Pluto lost its title as a planet, and most people stopped caring. But while the world moved on, Pluto kept hiding something. Because beneath its frozen surface is a place that should not exist. A world with moving ice, mountains that shouldn't stand, weather in near total darkness, and signs of heat where there should be none. When NASA finally reached Pluto after a journey of nearly 10 years, they expected to photograph a dead rock. Instead, they found a crime scene. A frozen world that shattered scientific predictions. A place where ice flows like lava, where giant mountains rise from impossible terrain, and where something beneath the surface may still be alive with heat. Pluto was supposed to be silent, but the deeper scientists looked, the stranger it became. And what they discovered out there, 5.9 billion kilometers from Earth, may be one of the most unsettling mysteries in the entire solar system. Pluto exists in a region where sunlight barely survives. At its average distance from the sun, daylight is weak and pale. Noon on Pluto looks less like a bright afternoon and more like a dim twilight. Shadows stretch long across frozen plains. Temperatures drop to levels so extreme that nitrogen becomes solid ice. On Earth, nitrogen surrounds us as a gas. We breathe it every second without thinking about it. On Pluto, the same substance freezes into sheets across the landscape. Imagine standing in a place so cold that the atmosphere itself begins turning into frost. That is Pluto. For years, scientists believed worlds this small could not stay active for long. Bigger planets hold on to heat. They have molten interiors, tectonic activity, magnetic fields, and internal energy. Small worlds cool down quickly. They freeze. They become lifeless. Pluto should have followed that rule. It should have become a silent block of rock and ice billions of years ago. But it didn't.
Pluto,
Everything
once a
changed
mystery,
in 2015.
reveals a frozen landscape
That was the
of
year
nitrogen ice
NASA's New
plains and
Horizons
towering
spacecraft
mountains.
finally arrived. After traveling for nearly a decade through deep space, it passed Pluto at incredible speed. There would be no second chance, no orbit, no return trip. The spacecraft had only hours to collect information, and those few hours completely changed how we see Pluto. The first images seemed almost impossible. Instead of a heavily cratered wasteland, scientists found smooth plains stretching across massive regions of the surface. One area stood out immediately, a giant heart-shaped feature. At first glance, it looked beautiful, but that bright region hid one of the strangest discoveries ever made in planetary science. Inside that enormous basin sat a
Pluto,
frozen plain
once a mystery,
made mostly of
reveals
nitrogen
a frozen
ice.
landscape of
The surface
nitrogen
looked
ice
young,
plains and
shockingly
towering
young.
mountains.
In space, age is usually easy to see. Older worlds collect scars. Asteroids crash into them over billions of years, leaving impact craters everywhere. The Moon is covered in them. Mercury is covered in them. Even Mars carries deep marks from ancient collisions. But parts of Pluto looked almost untouched. That meant something was erasing the evidence. Something was reshaping the surface. The plain was not dead. It was moving. Scientists discovered enormous polygon-shaped patterns spread across the frozen landscape. Each one stretched for kilometers. At first, nobody understood what caused them. Then the answer appeared. The ice itself was slowly circulating. Warmer material rose from below. Cooler material sank back down, like thick liquid moving in slow motion. Pluto's frozen surface was behaving like something alive. Ice was flowing, and that raised a disturbing question. Where was the heat coming from? Pluto receives very little energy from the sun. It has no nearby giant planet pulling and stretching it. There should be no internal power strong enough to keep activity going. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Something beneath Pluto's surface still carried heat. The mysteries only grew deeper. Mountains appeared in the images. Not small hills, massive structures rising thousands of meters high. On Earth, mountains form through tectonic movement, but Pluto should be too small for that. These peaks were made of water ice. At Pluto's temperatures, water ice becomes harder than stone. Sharp ridges, steep cliffs, very little erosion. They looked young, fresh, as if they had formed relatively recently. That suggested Pluto was still changing, still active. Then came another discovery: frozen rivers. On Earth, glaciers slowly reshape landscapes. Pluto has similar systems, except they are made of nitrogen ice. These frozen flows move from high regions into lower basins, leaving trails behind, evidence of movement. The surface of Pluto is not frozen in time. It behaves like a world still evolving. Imagine standing there. The sky is dim. The horizon glows faintly blue. Ice walls rise in the distance. Frozen rivers cut through valleys.
Pluto,
and
once a
beneath
mystery,
the silence,
reveals
the
a
ground
frozen
slowly
landscape of
shifts.
nitrogen ice
Not
plains
fast
and
enough to
towering
see,
mountains.
but enough to change the world over time. Pluto should not look like this. That is what makes it unsettling, because science depends on patterns, and Pluto keeps breaking them. One of the strangest discoveries came from Pluto's atmosphere. Most people assume Pluto has no atmosphere, but it does. A thin layer of nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide surrounds the dwarf world. Weak, but real, and surprisingly large. When sunlight passes through it, blue haze appears. Thin layers
Pluto,
stacked
once a
high
mystery,
above the surface.
reveals a frozen
The effect
landscape
looks
of
beautiful,
nitrogen ice
almost
plains and
peaceful,
towering mountains.
but the chemistry behind it is complex. Sunlight interacts with methane, particles combine, organic molecules form. These materials drift downward and coat Pluto in reddish tones. Its color is not just rock, it is chemistry falling from the sky. The atmosphere also changes over time. Pluto follows a long orbit around the Sun. One trip takes 248 Earth years. As Pluto moves closer to the Sun, frozen gases turn into vapor. The atmosphere expands. When Pluto moves farther away,
once
the
a
gases
mystery,
freeze again.
reveals a
The
frozen
atmosphere
landscape of
collapses.
nitrogen ice plains
Pluto
and towering
essentially
mountains.
breathes slowly across centuries. Even stranger, Pluto may have weather. Dark streaks across the surface suggest movement. Scientists believe winds may push frozen particles across the landscape. Tiny dunes may exist. Dunes on Pluto, a world with almost no atmosphere. Wind should not work there, yet signs of it exist. And perhaps the biggest mystery lies below the surface, a hidden ocean. At first, the idea sounded impossible. Liquid water on Pluto at those temperatures? But evidence suggests it may exist, buried beneath thick layers of ice, protected in darkness, mixed with ammonia which lowers the freezing point. If true, Pluto may have carried an underground ocean for billions of years, never touched by sunlight, never exposed to space, hidden beneath the frozen crust. That possibility changes everything. Because liquid water creates questions. Could chemistry exist there? Could something survive? Nobody claims Pluto contains life, but scientists can no longer completely rule it out. And that alone shows how much Pluto changed scientific thinking. Pluto keeps becoming more complicated. It looks simple, yet refuses to behave simply. Even its largest moon adds to the mystery. Charon is enormous compared to Pluto. The two worlds orbit each other around a shared center, locked together, always facing one another, like two dancers frozen in space.
Pluto,
Charon
once a
also
mystery,
shows strange
reveals a
terrain,
frozen
deep
landscape of
canyons,
nitrogen
dark
ice
polar
plains and
regions,
towering mountains.
evidence of geological history. The Pluto system is not a lonely rock. It is a complex environment, and perhaps